The taxi pulled up to the curb of the old Victorian house on Maple Street, its white paint peeling in places, revealing decades of weather and neglect. Emma Carter took a deep breath as she paid the driver, the knot in her stomach tightening with each passing second. It had been 15 years since she'd set foot in Oak Ridge, the small New England town where she'd grown up. 15 years of building a life far away from the memories that still haunted her. The driver placed her suitcase on the sidewalk. "You sure this is the right address, miss? Place looks like it's seen better days." Emma nodded, unable to find her voice for a moment. "Yes, it's right. Thank you." She watched as the taxi drove away, taking with it her last escape route. The late September air carried a chill that went beyond the weather, seeping into her bones as she stared at the house she'd once called home. Her father's funeral was tomorrow. Thomas Carter, respected doctor and pillar of the community, had died suddenly of a heart attack at 68. The news had reached Emma in Seattle, where she'd built a successful career as an architect, deliberately constructing a life as different from Oak Ridge as possible. Her first instinct had been to send flowers and her regrets. But Sarah, her younger sister, had called, voice cracking with emotion. "Please come home. I can't do this alone." Those words had broken through 15 years of carefully maintained distance. Sarah, always the peacemaker, had been the only one Emma had kept in touch with, though their conversations carefully avoided any mention of their father or older brother, James. Now, as she walked up the cracked pathway to the porch, Emma felt like she was moving through a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. The old porch swing still hung from rusty chains, creaking in the wind. She'd spent countless summer evenings on that swing, reading books and dreaming of escape. Before everything fell apart, the door opened before she could knock. Sarah stood there, her face pale and drawn with exhaustion. At 35, she looked older than Emma remembered, fine lines around her eyes and mouth that hadn't been there during their last video call. "You came," Sarah whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell and make Emma disappear. "I said I would." Emma shifted her weight, unsure whether to hug her sister or maintain the distance that had defined their relationship for so many years. Sarah solved the dilemma by pulling Emma into a tight embrace. "Thank you," she murmured against Emma's shoulder. The familiar scent of Sarah's shampoo, something floral and sweet, brought back a flood of memories that Emma had tried so hard to suppress. The interior of the house hit Emma with a wave of sensory memories. The same faded wallpaper in the hallway. The grandfather clock that had belonged to their great-grandfather, still ticking away the seconds as if time had stood still. Family photos lined the walls, birthdays, graduations, holidays, documenting a supposedly happy family. Emma's face disappeared from the photos around the time she turned 18. "Nothing's changed," Emma said, the words feeling heavy in her mouth. Sarah gave a humorless laugh. "Everything's changed, Em. Just not the house." In the living room, Emma froze. James stood by the fireplace, a glass of what looked like whiskey in his hand. At 40, her brother had grown to look remarkably like their father, the same strong jaw and penetrating blue eyes that could cut through any excuse. The siblings stared at each other, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between them. "I wasn't sure you'd show up," James finally said, his voice cool and controlled. Always controlled, just like their father. "I'm here for Sarah," Emma replied, matching his tone. "And to say goodbye to Dad. That's all." James took a slow sip of his drink. "Well, there's the reading of the will after the funeral tomorrow. Dad's lawyer insisted all three of us be present. I don't want anything from him." "That's convenient," James said with a slight smirk. "Because I doubt he left you anything anyway." "James, please," Sarah interjected, the familiar role of mediator slipping on like a well-worn glove. "Let's not do this now. We have arrangements to finalize for tomorrow." Emma picked up her suitcase. "Where am I staying?" "Your old room," Sarah said quietly. "I aired it out yesterday." The thought of sleeping in her childhood bedroom sent a chill through Emma. "I should have booked a hotel." "Nonsense," Sarah insisted. "Your family. You belong here." Family. The word rang hollow in Emma's ears. What did that even mean anymore? The Carters had projected the image of the perfect family to the outside world. Successful doctor father, devoted homemaker mother, 3 bright children destined for great things. Nobody in Oak Ridge knew what happened behind closed doors. As Emma climbed the familiar stairs, each step brought back memories she'd spent years in therapy trying to process. The third step that creaked. The family portrait at the landing, her mother's smile not quite reaching her eyes. The door to her father's study, always closed to the children unless they were called in for one of his talks. Her room was exactly as she'd left it the day she walked out 15 years ago. The blue walls, the bookshelf full of novels and architecture books, the desk where she'd drawn countless building designs, planning her escape one blueprint at a time. Sarah had clearly dusted and put fresh sheets on the bed, but otherwise, it was a perfect preservation of 18-year-old Emma. Emma set her suitcase on the bed and walked to the window that overlooked the backyard. The old oak tree still stood tall, its branches now bare as autumn took hold. She could almost see herself at 12, climbing higher than her father allowed, relishing the temporary freedom. A soft knock on the doorframe made her turn. Sarah stood there, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "There's something you should know, Em," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dad changed his will just before he died, and there's someone else coming to the funeral tomorrow. Someone you haven't met." Emma felt her heart rate quicken. "What are you talking about?" "Who?" Sarah glanced over her shoulder, ensuring they were alone. "Dad had a daughter with another woman. She's 24. Her name is Lily, and apparently, she's been part of his life for years." Emma sat on the edge of her bed, the information hitting her like a physical blow. Dad had another daughter? All this time, her mind raced, calculating dates and remembering fragments of arguments between her parents that suddenly took on new meaning. Sarah nodded, moving to sit beside her sister. "I only found out 3 years ago. I came by the house unexpectedly, and she was here with Dad. He couldn't exactly hide her existence at that point. And you never told me?" Emma's voice rose slightly before she caught herself. "I wanted to, but Dad made me promise not to. He said he would tell you and James himself when the time was right." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Em. I should have told you anyway." Emma stood up and paced the small room, trying to process this revelation. So all those years he acted like I was dead to him for leaving. He was building a relationship with this Lily. "It's not her fault," Sarah said quickly. "She's actually really nice. Her mother worked as a nurse at Dad's practice years ago. After Mom died, he didn't waste any time, did he?" Emma interrupted bitterly. Sarah sighed. "It started before Mom died, Em. I think that's why Mom was so depressed in those last years." The pieces were falling into place now. Their mother's withdrawal, the increased tension in the house, the way their father would disappear for hours with vague explanations about emergency patients. Elizabeth Carter had battled cancer for 3 years before succumbing to it when Emma was 16. During those years, their father had apparently been building a second family. "Does James know?" Sarah shook her head. "No. Dad was planning to tell him after the holidays. Obviously, that plan didn't work out." Emma laughed, a short, harsh sound without humor. "So tomorrow at the funeral, James is going to meet our half-sister for the first time? That should go well." Sarah winced. "I know it's a lot, but I wanted you to be prepared." From downstairs came the sound of the front door opening and voices. James speaking to someone in a tone Emma hadn't heard from him in years. Warm, welcoming, loving. "That's Rachel, James's wife," Sarah explained. "They've been married for 5 years. They have twin boys, 4 years old. Michael and Thomas." Emma felt a pang. She'd never met her nephews, had only seen photos Sarah had sent. Another loss in the long list of family connections she'd sacrificed by staying away. "Does Rachel know about our family history? The real story?" Sarah hesitated. "I don't think so. James has always been good at maintaining appearances. Just like Dad." The comparison clearly hit a nerve with Emma. Their father had been a master of presentation, respected doctor, grieving widower, dedicated father. Only his children had seen his other sides, the cutting criticism, the impossible standards, the cold fury when disappointed. For James, the eldest and only son, the pressure had been most intense, molding him into a miniature version of their father. "I need some air," Emma said suddenly, heading for the door. "Dinner's at 7, Sarah called after her. "Rachel's been looking forward to meeting you." Emma nodded without turning around, needing to escape the house and its memories. She walked through the back door and into the garden, now overgrown and unkempt. Their mother had loved gardening, coaxing flowers and vegetables from the New England soil. After her death, it seemed no one had maintained her carefully planned beds. Emma found herself at the old garden shed, a place she'd often hidden as a teenager. To her surprise, the door opened easily, recently oiled hinges swinging without the squeak she remembered. Inside, the small space was clean and organized, garden tools hanging on one wall, a workbench along another. But it was the far corner that caught her attention. A small desk and chair had been set up, with a lamp and a stack of sketchbooks. Emma approached slowly, recognizing her father's handwriting on labels affixed to each book. Lily's drawings. Age 8. Lily's designs. High school. Lily's college portfolio. With trembling hands, Emma opened one of the books. Inside were architectural drawings, not unlike those she had created at the same age. Page after page of buildings, bridges, homes, some fanciful, others practical, all showing talent and vision. She's studying architecture at Princeton. Sarah's voice came from the doorway, making Emma jump. Dad was so proud. Said she had the same eye for design that you have. Emma closed the sketchbook carefully. He kept all these? He kept everything she ever drew or designed. Just like he kept all your work in the attic. Emma's head snapped up. What? Sarah nodded. After you left, he boxed up all your drawings and designs. Every award you won. Every article about your work he could find. He followed your career, Em. He had a file on his computer with links to all your projects. The revelation left Emma speechless. Her father had never reached out, never called, never acknowledged her achievements directly. The last words he'd spoken to her, standing in the driveway as she waited for the taxi that would take her away from Oak Ridge forever. If you walk away now, don't expect to be welcomed back. Why didn't he ever contact me? Emma finally asked, her voice barely audible. Sarah leaned against the doorframe. Pride. Stubbornness. Fear, maybe. The same reasons you never contacted him. A car door slammed in the distance, followed by children's voices, high-pitched and excited. Emma followed Sarah back toward the house, watching as two identical boys with dark hair raced around the side yard, a tall man with James's features but a gentler expression chasing after them. Uncle Michael would have caught us by now, one of the boys said, giggling as he dodged his father's grasp. Uncle Michael has 2 good knees, James replied, wincing slightly as he straightened up. He caught sight of Emma and froze momentarily before composing his features into a neutral expression. Boys, come here. There's someone I want you to meet. The twins approached cautiously, suddenly shy. James put a hand on each of their shoulders. This is your Aunt Emma. Your mom and I have told you about her, remember? She designs big buildings in Seattle. The boys studied Emma with identical serious expressions before one of them, Emma couldn't tell which, asked, Did you really build a library that looks like it's floating? Emma smiled despite herself. I designed it, yes. Other people built it. Cool, both boys said in unison. Michael and Thomas, go find your mom, James instructed. Tell her Aunt Emma is here. As the boys ran off, James turned to Emma. They've been excited to meet you. Rachel shows them pictures of your buildings. She majored in art history, appreciates good design. The olive branch was unexpected. I'd like to meet her, Emma said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Back inside, the house felt different with children's energy animating the space. Rachel turned out to be warm and genuine, with none of the stiffness Emma had anticipated from James's wife. Dinner was less awkward than expected, with the twins providing natural breaks in conversation with their questions and observations. It wasn't until after the boys had been put to bed that the conversation turned serious again. The 4 adults sat in the living room, the grandfather clock ticking away in the background. So, James said, swirling the ice in his drink, are we going to talk about why Dad's lawyer is being so mysterious about the will? He wouldn't give me any details, just insisted all 3 of us had to be there. Sarah glanced at Emma, a silent question in her eyes. Emma gave a small nod. There's something you should know before tomorrow, James, Sarah began carefully. Something about Dad that might explain the lawyer's insistence. As Sarah explained about Lily, Emma watched her brother's face. The initial shock, followed by disbelief, then a cold anger that was all too familiar, the Carter temper that both James and their father shared. Are you telling me, James said with dangerous quietness when Sarah finished, that our father had an affair while our mother was dying of cancer? That he had another child he kept secret from us for over 20 years, and now she's showing up at his funeral to claim part of his estate? She's not like that, Sarah protested. She didn't ask for any of this. Dad wanted her recognized as his daughter, legally and publicly. That was his choice, not hers. James stood abruptly, his drink forgotten. Unbelievable. Even from the grave, he's finding ways to control us, to throw our lives into chaos. Rachel reached for his hand. James, calm down. We don't know what the will says yet. It doesn't matter what it says, James snapped. It's the principle. All those years of lectures about honor and family duty, and he was living a double life. Emma felt a strange sensation building in her chest. Not quite laughter, not quite tears. Welcome to my reality, James. Dad was never who he pretended to be. James turned on her. You don't get to say that. You weren't here. You didn't have to watch him deteriorate after Mom died. You didn't have to step up and take care of Sarah, take care of this house, take over his finances when he couldn't anymore. You just left and built your perfect life elsewhere. Perfect. Emma stood now too, years of suppressed anger rising to the surface. You have no idea what it cost me to leave, to build a life without any support, any family. But it was better than staying here with him. Stop it, both of you, Sarah pleaded, tears streaming down her face now. Please. Tomorrow is going to be hard enough without you two at each other's throats. Rachel stood and put her arm around Sarah. Let's get some tea, Sarah. Give these two a minute alone. She gave James a meaningful look as she led Sarah toward the kitchen. In the sudden quiet, Emma and James stared at each other across the room, the years and hurt between them almost tangible. You know why I left? Emma finally said, her voice low. After what he did. James's jaw tightened. I know what you claimed he did. He broke my arm, James. When I told him I wasn't going to medical school, that I was accepting the architecture scholarship instead. He said it was an accident, that you fell down the stairs when you stormed off. Emma rolled up her sleeve, revealing a jagged scar along her forearm. The break was so bad it needed surgery. The doctor at the hospital didn't believe I fell. He asked me 3 times if someone had hurt me. James looked away. Why are you bringing this up now? Because tomorrow we're going to stand at his grave and listen to people talk about what a wonderful man he was. And then we're going to meet a half-sister who apparently got the father we never had. Emma's voice broke slightly. And I need to know if we're going to keep pretending, or if we're finally going to be honest about who Thomas Carter really was. The funeral home was filled with flowers, their cloying sweetness failing to mask the underlying scent of chemicals and grief. Emma sat in the front row between Sarah and Rachel, watching as a steady stream of Oak Ridge residents filed past the open casket to pay their respects. James stood near their father's body, shaking hands and accepting condolences with the perfect blend of strength and appropriate sorrow. Half the town is here, Sarah whispered. Dad treated 3 generations of some families. Emma nodded, her eyes scanning the crowd. She wondered which one was Lily, if she was even here yet. The thought of meeting this unknown sister made her stomach churn with a mix of curiosity and resentment. The night before, after their confrontation, James had retreated upstairs without resolving anything. Emma had lain awake for hours, memories surfacing that she'd spent years burying. Her father's rage when she defied him, the casual cruelty of his criticism, the way he could make her feel worthless with just a look. But also, rare moments of approval that she'd craved desperately. His smile when she won the state math competition, his hand briefly squeezing her shoulder when she graduated high school at the top of her class. Emma, Sarah nudged her gently. The service is about to start. The minister spoke of Thomas Carter's dedication to the community, his years of service as the town's most respected doctor, his generosity to local charities. A colleague from the hospital described his medical brilliance, his calm in emergencies. A neighbor recounted how Dr. Carter had saved her son's life during a sudden allergic reaction. With each eulogy, Emma felt herself growing more distant, as if she were floating above the scene, watching a movie about a stranger. Then James stood to speak. Emma braced herself for more sanitized remembrances, but her brother surprised her. My father was a complicated man, James began, his voice steady but his hands gripping the podium tightly. Brilliant, demanding, sometimes difficult to please. He had high expectations for himself and for those around him. James paused, glancing toward Emma. Too high sometimes. He pushed all of us to excel, to be the best versions of ourselves. But he wasn't always able to see who we truly were beneath his expectations. A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't the usual funeral platitude. My father made mistakes, James continued. as we all do. He could be harsh, unforgiving. But in his later years, I believe he tried to make amends in his own way, to right some wrongs, to connect with people he'd pushed away. He looked down at the casket. I hope he found some peace before the end. As James returned to his seat, his eyes met Emma's. Something passed between them, not forgiveness, exactly, but recognition. A shared truth finally acknowledged. At the cemetery, the autumn wind whipped around them, scattering golden leaves across the manicured grass. As the casket was lowered into the ground, Emma noticed a young woman standing slightly apart from the main group of mourners. She was tall and slender, with the same auburn hair that Sarah had inherited from their mother. But her eyes, those were undeniably Thomas Carter's eyes, a distinctive blue-gray that could look either warm or icy, depending on the emotion behind them. Lily. After the final prayers, as people began to disperse, the young woman approached Sarah, who embraced her warmly. Emma stood frozen, watching the interaction, until Sarah beckoned her over. Emma, this is Lily. Lily, this is our sister Emma. Lily held out her hand, uncertainty in her expression. It's nice to finally meet you. I've seen all your buildings. They're amazing. Emma shook her hand briefly. Thank you. She searched for something else to say, but her mind was blank. Here was a living embodiment of her father's betrayal, yet also an innocent party in all of this. I'm sorry about the timing, Lily said, filling the awkward silence. I told Sarah I could meet you all another time, but Mr. Reynolds, the lawyer, insisted I be here today. James appeared at Emma's side, his posture rigid. You're Lily, he said, more statement than question. Yes. She met his gaze directly, and Emma saw a flash of their father's stubbornness in her stance. I know this is strange for all of you. It's strange for me too. I never expected any of this. Before James could respond, a middle-aged man in a charcoal suit approached the group. I'm sorry to intrude on your grief, he said, but I'm Richard Reynolds, your father's attorney. Dr. Carter left specific instructions that his will be read immediately following the service at his house. If you could all make your way there, I'll join you shortly. The drive back to the house was silent, tension building with each passing mile. Emma rode with Sarah, while James and Rachel followed in their car. Lily drove her own vehicle, a sensible Honda that seemed to reflect the practicality Emma had glimpsed in her brief interaction. At the house, Reynolds set up in the dining room, arranging papers on the polished surface where countless family dinners had taken place. The five of them sat around the table, Emma, Sarah, James, Rachel, and Lily, like strangers gathered for an uncomfortable business meeting. Before I begin, Reynolds said, adjusting his glasses, Dr. Carter asked me to give you this. He placed a sealed envelope in the center of the table. He instructed that you read it together before the will itself. Sarah reached for the envelope, but James intercepted it. I'll read it, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He broke the seal and unfolded a single sheet of paper covered in their father's distinctive handwriting. To my children, James read aloud, his voice tight. If you're reading this, I've finally run out of time to make things right in person. I've made many mistakes in my life, but none greater than failing those I should have protected and loved unconditionally. James paused, swallowing hard before continuing. James, I pushed you too hard, tried to mold you into a copy of myself, not recognizing that your strength lies in being different than me, better than me. Sarah, I leaned on you too heavily after your mother died, burdened you with responsibilities that were never yours to bear. Emma, James's voice faltered slightly. I hurt you unforgivably, both physically and emotionally. My anger that day you stood up to me was inexcusable. I've carried the shame of what I did to you for 15 years. Emma felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Lily came into my life during my darkest time. Her mother, Catherine, showed me kindness when I deserved none. In trying to be a father to Lily, I learned too late what I should have been to all of you. I know this letter changes nothing. Words cannot undo actions. But I want you to know that I died understanding the full weight of my failures. James set the letter down, his hands shaking slightly. The room was silent except for Sarah's quiet sniffling. Reynolds cleared his throat. Shall I proceed with the will? The actual document contained few surprises after the letter. The house was left to Sarah, who had been caring for it in recent years. James received their father's medical practice and associated properties. A substantial trust had been established for Lily's education and future security. And Emma. Emma had been left the lakeside cabin that had been in the Carter family for generations. The place where they'd spent summers swimming and fishing, where their mother had taught them to canoe, where they'd roasted marshmallows under starry skies before everything fell apart. Along with the cabin came a separate letter, addressed only to her. As Reynolds packed up his briefcase, the siblings sat in stunned silence, absorbing the implications of their father's final words. He knew. James finally said, his voice hollow. All these years, he knew exactly what he'd done to you, Emma. And he never apologized. Never tried to make it right. Would you have believed him if he had? Emma asked quietly. James met her gaze, really met it for the first time in 15 years. I should have believed you from the beginning. I'm sorry, Em. I failed you too. The admission broke something loose in Emma's chest, a knot of anger and hurt that had been lodged there since she was 18 years old. She didn't respond, couldn't find the words yet, but she held her brother's gaze, acknowledging his apology with a small nod. Rachel stood, placing a hand on James's shoulder. I think we should give Emma and Sarah some time with Lily. The boys are with my parents, but I should call and check on them. After James and Rachel left the room, an awkward silence fell over the three sisters. Lily fidgeted with the edge of a placemat, clearly uncomfortable. I should probably go too, she said. This is a family time. You are family, Sarah said firmly, whether we all knew it or not. Emma studied the young woman across the table. This sister she hadn't known existed until yesterday. In her, Emma could see echoes of both her father and her mother, along with something uniquely her own. Lily hadn't asked for any of this complexity, this tangled web of secrets and resentments that defined the Carter family legacy. Do you have plans after graduation? Emma found herself asking. Lily looked surprised at the question. I've been applying for internships at firms in Boston. I'm interested in sustainable urban design. My firm has an office in Boston, Emma said, the words coming out before she'd fully considered them. We have a good internship program. Lily's eyes widened. Are you offering? I'm not offering anything yet, Emma clarified quickly. Just information. You'd have to apply like anyone else. But I could look at your portfolio, give you some feedback. It was a small gesture, barely an olive branch. But it was something, a crack in the wall Emma had built around herself, a tentative step toward a future where the past didn't define every interaction. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds that had hung over the funeral, casting long shadows across the dining room table. In the kitchen, they could hear James returning, speaking in low tones to Rachel. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 3 times, marking the hour. I have a flight back to Seattle tomorrow morning, Emma said, suddenly feeling exhausted. But I'd like to see your work before I go, if you want to bring it by. Lily nodded, a cautious smile forming. I'd like that. Thank you. Sarah reached across the table, taking one of Emma's hands and one of Lily's. It's a start, she said softly. That's all any of us can ask for right now. Just a start. Emma felt the weight of her father's separate letter in her pocket, still unopened. Whatever private confession or explanation it contained could wait. For now, sitting in this room with these women, one sister she'd kept at arm's length for too long, another she'd just met, was enough of a reckoning with the past. The future, with all its complications and possibilities, would unfold in its own time. That evening, after everyone had gone, Emma sat alone on the porch swing, the weight of her father's personal letter heavy in her hand. The envelope was worn at the edges, as if it had been handled many times before being sealed. Her name was written on the front in her father's precise handwriting, the same handwriting that had marked her architectural drawings with corrections throughout her childhood. The temperature had dropped with the sun, and Emma pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. From inside the house came the soft sounds of Sarah preparing tea, giving Emma the space she needed. After a deep breath, Emma finally broke the seal and unfolded the pages inside. Emma, the letter began, of all my children, you were the one who saw me most clearly, the one brave enough to stand against me when I was wrong. I've spent 15 years pretending that your departure was a betrayal rather than an escape from harm I caused. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she continued reading. The day I broke your arm was the worst day of my life, though I didn't allow myself to recognize it then. My rage when you defied me revealed a monster I'd been harboring inside, one that had shown itself in smaller ways for years. The look in your eyes that day haunts me still. Not just pain, but a final disillusionment. You saw what I truly was. The porch light flickered on automatically as darkness settled over the yard. In the distance, a train whistle sounded, the same melancholy sound that had scored countless nights of her childhood. When you left, something in me finally broke. Not right away. For months, I maintained my anger, my certainty that you were wrong and I was right. But slowly, truth has a way of seeping in through the cracks of our defenses. Meeting Catherine, Lily's mother, was part of my awakening. She saw through me in ways Elizabeth never could, or perhaps never allowed herself to. Catherine refused to accept my self-justifications, my excuses. Emma paused, letting this sink in. Her father had found someone who held him accountable, someone who wouldn't tolerate his behavior, something her mother had never managed. The cabin I've left you isn't just property. It's a request. After your mother died, I spent time there alone, finally confronting who I was and what I'd done. In the desk drawer in the main room, you'll find journals I kept during those years, an accounting of my failings, my regrets. They're yours now, to read or burn as you see fit. Emma looked up from the letter, staring out at the darkened yard. The thought of reading her father's private reflections left her with mixed feelings, curiosity, apprehension, a reluctance to reopen old wounds. I rebuilt my relationship with Lily from scratch, trying to be the father I should have been to all of you. I won't claim I succeeded entirely. Old habits of control and judgment were deeply rooted. But I tried, Emma. I tried to learn from my worst mistakes. The screen door creaked open, and Sarah appeared with 2 steaming mugs. She handed one to Emma without a word, then settled on the other end of the swing. The familiar scent of chamomile rose from the mug, their mother's remedy for troubled nights. You've made an extraordinary life for yourself, the letter continued. I've followed your career from afar, collected articles about your designs, watched virtual tours of your buildings. You achieved everything without my help, perhaps because of my absence rather than despite it. Your vision is remarkable. The clean lines and functional beauty of your work reflect a clarity I never possessed. Emma took a sip of tea, the hot liquid warming her from inside as she turned to the final page. I don't ask for forgiveness. Some wounds run too deep for that. But I do ask that you consider maintaining a connection with your sisters, both of them. Sarah has carried too much alone. And Lily admires you enormously. She discovered your work on her own, before knowing you were related. She keeps a model of your Rainier Square project on her desk. The revelation startled Emma. She'd won several awards for that design, a mixed-use building that seemed to cascade down its site, like water flowing over rocks. This is my final request. Visit the cabin once. See what's there. Then decide what relationship, if any, you want with the family you were born into and the family that remains. Whatever you choose, know that in my final years, I recognize the full measure of my failings as a father. I die with clarity, if not peace. Thomas Carter. Emma folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Night had fully settled over Oak Ridge, the streetlights casting pools of yellow light at regular intervals down Maple Street. Was it what you expected? Sarah asked softly, breaking the long silence. Emma considered the question. I don't know what I expected. Not this. She tapped the envelope against her palm. He admitted everything, Sarah? In writing. About breaking my arm. About his anger. About all of it. Sarah nodded slowly. He changed in these last years. Not completely. He was still Dad, stubborn, opinionated, challenging. But something shifted after his heart attack 5 years ago. Like he suddenly realized he wasn't immortal. Do you believe people can really change? Emma asked, genuinely curious about her sister's perspective. Sarah had stayed, had witnessed whatever transformation their father claimed to have undergone. Sarah took her time answering. I think they can recognize their mistakes and try to do better. Dad did try. With Lily, with me, even with James, though that was complicated. But he never stopped regretting what happened with you. Emma leaned her head back against the swing, using her foot to set it in gentle motion. The rhythmic creaking of the chains was soothingly familiar. He wants me to go to the cabin, to read his journals. Will you? I don't know. The idea of spending time in a place so laden with memories, both good and painful, was daunting. The Carter family cabin sat on Lake Champlain, about an hour's drive north. It had been their summer refuge when the children were young, before their mother's illness, before the family had fractured. I'd have to change my flight. Sarah didn't press, just sat quietly beside her, sipping her tea. After a few minutes, she said, Lily is coming over tomorrow morning with her portfolio. She's nervous about it. She shouldn't be, Emma replied. From what I saw in Dad's shed, she's talented. She is, Sarah agreed. But your opinion means a lot to her. She's followed your work for years, even has a subscription to Architectural Digest just to track your projects. The information aligned with what her father had written. Emma felt a strange emotion she couldn't immediately identify. Not quite pride, not quite discomfort, but something in between. The idea that this sister she never knew had been admiring her work from afar, feeling a connection Emma had been unaware of. James asked if you'd have dinner with him and Rachel tomorrow night. Before you leave, Sarah added. Just the three of you. Emma raised an eyebrow. What's that about? I think he has things he wants to say to you. Without an audience. The prospect of a private conversation with James was both necessary and intimidating. They'd scarcely spoken directly to each other since she arrived, communicating mostly through Sarah or around the edges of family discussions. Tell him yes, Emma decided. But I might change my flight. Stay a few more days. The words surprised her as she said them, but she realized they felt right. 24 hours wasn't enough time to process everything that had happened, everything she'd learned. Sarah smiled, the expression brightening her tired face. You could stay here, or... She hesitated. The cabin isn't far. If you wanted some space to think. The suggestion hung in the night air between them. Emma considered it, remembering summer mornings on the lake, the call of loons across the water, the simple peace of that place before life had grown so complicated. Maybe, she said finally. Let me see how things go with Lily tomorrow. And with James. Sarah nodded, understanding as always. They sat together in comfortable silence until their tea grew cold, the porch swing moving gently. Two sisters reconnecting without words in the quiet of an autumn night. Inside the house, Emma knew, lay complicated conversations and decisions. Beyond Oak Ridge waited her carefully constructed life in Seattle. Her firm, her friends, the condo overlooking Puget Sound that she'd designed herself. But for this moment, sitting with Sarah in the familiar rhythm of the porch swing, Emma felt something she hadn't expected to find in her childhood home, a tentative sense of peace. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Emma waited for Lily to arrive. She'd slept better than expected, the emotional exhaustion of the funeral finally catching up with her. Sarah had already left for a meeting with the funeral home to finalize paperwork, leaving Emma alone in the house with her thoughts. She'd made coffee and was scanning through work emails on her laptop when the doorbell rang. Taking a deep breath, Emma walked to the front door and opened it to find Lily standing on the porch, clutching a large portfolio case and looking even more nervous than she had at the funeral. Good morning, Emma said, stepping back to let her in. Sarah had to go out, but she should be back soon. Would you like some coffee? Yes, please, Lily replied, following Emma to the kitchen. She set her portfolio on the table carefully. I wasn't sure what to bring. I have some recent projects, but also some conceptual work that's less developed. Emma poured coffee into a mug and slid it across the counter. Bring it all. I'd like to see your process as well as your finished work. As Lily arranged her portfolio, Emma noticed the young woman's hands, long-fingered and precise in their movements, much like her own. Another unexpected connection. This is my senior thesis project, Lily explained, opening to a series of renderings and floor plans for what appeared to be a community arts center. It's designed for a site in downtown Springfield that's currently abandoned. I wanted to create something that would serve multiple functions, gallery space, classrooms, affordable studios for local artists. Emma studied the drawings with growing interest. The design was innovative, a series of interconnected volumes that seemed to flow into each other, with clever use of natural light and circulation. Not perfect, but showing real promise and a distinctive perspective. Who were your influences for this? Emma asked, genuinely curious. Tadao Ando, for the way he works with concrete and light, Lily replied without hesitation. And Lena Bobardi for her community-focused approach. She paused, then added more tentatively. And you, actually. Your Rainier Square project, the way you integrated public and private spaces. Emma glanced up, meeting Lily's eyes, those startlingly familiar eyes. It's good work, she said honestly. There are some structural issues here and here. She pointed to specific junctions in the design, but the concept is strong. You have a good eye for how people move through space. Lily's face lit up at the comment. That's exactly what I was trying to focus on. The human experience within the architecture, not just the form itself. For the next hour, they moved through Lily's portfolio, Emma offering critiques and suggestions, Lily asking questions, and occasionally defending her choices. The initial awkwardness gradually gave way to a professional exchange that felt surprisingly comfortable. In Lily's work, Emma recognized a sensibility that resonated with her own approach to design, a concern for how buildings affected the people who used them, not just their visual impact. This reminds me of something I designed in graduate school, Emma said, pointing to a conceptual sketch for a floating pavilion. I was obsessed with the idea of architecture that seemed to defy gravity. I'd love to see it, Lily said eagerly. Did you ever build it? Emma shook her head. Just a model. But some of those ideas eventually made it into my Seattle Public Library expansion. She hesitated, then added, I have the original drawings somewhere in my studio at home. Your work on that library expansion was what made me want to pursue architecture, Lily admitted. I saw it in a magazine when I was 16. The way you extended the original brutalist structure but softened it with those suspended reading rooms. It was like nothing I'd seen before. The revelation created a strange feeling in Emma's chest, a pride she hadn't anticipated, tinged with regret for the years of connection they'd missed. In another reality, she might have been mentoring Lily all along, watching her talent develop and flourish. Why didn't he tell us about you? Emma asked suddenly, the question escaping before she could consider its impact. All these years, Lily's expression grew serious. He was trying to protect me, I think. And maybe you too, in his way. She traced the edge of a drawing with her fingertip. My mom didn't want to disrupt your family. She never asked him to leave your mother. When I was younger, he would visit on weekends sometimes, or take me on short trips. Mom always said it was complicated. That's one word for it, Emma said dryly. Lily met her gaze directly. I know how it looks. But he wasn't just some man who abandoned his second family. He was there for me, for school events, when I was sick, for important conversations. And he talked about all of you. He kept photos of you in his wallet. The image was difficult for Emma to reconcile with the father she'd known. The man who'd broken her arm in a fit of rage, who'd let her walk away without a word of reconciliation for 15 years. He had many regrets about how things happened with you. Lily continued softly. He told me once that his biggest failure was letting his pride keep him from reaching out to you after you left. Before Emma could respond, the front door opened, and Sarah called out, I'm home. Is Lily here yet? The moment for deeper conversation passed as Sarah joined them in the kitchen, bringing a rush of energy and normalcy. But something had shifted between Emma and Lily, a tentative bridge forming across the gulf of their separate histories. I should get going, Lily said eventually, gathering her portfolio. I have a study group meeting this afternoon back at school. I'll walk you out, Emma offered. At the door, she hesitated, then said, if you're interested in an internship at my firm, email me your portfolio. I can put in a word with the Boston office director. Lily's smile was immediate and genuine. Really? That would be amazing. No guarantees, Emma cautioned. But your work deserves consideration. After Lily left, Emma found Sarah watching her with a knowing expression. What? Emma asked defensively. Nothing, Sarah replied. It's just nice to see you connecting with her. She's been so nervous about meeting you. Emma sighed, leaning against the counter. It's weird, Sarah. She feels both familiar and completely foreign at the same time. She has Dad's eyes. And Mom's hands. And your talent, Sarah added. Don't think I didn't notice the similarities in how you both approach design problems. Emma couldn't deny it. There had been moments during their portfolio review when Lily's thought process had mirrored her own so closely it was unsettling. I called the airline, Emma said, changing the subject. Changed my flight to Sunday instead of tomorrow. I thought I might drive up to the cabin tomorrow, stay overnight. See what Dad left there. Sarah nodded, trying to hide her obvious pleasure at the news that Emma was extending her stay. Want company? I think I need to do this part alone, Emma replied gently. But I'll be back Saturday evening. We can have dinner together before I leave. The rest of the day passed quietly. Emma caught up on work emails and had a conference call with her partners in Seattle, who were understanding about her extended absence. Family matters take time, her senior partner said sympathetically. We've got everything covered here. As evening approached, Emma found herself growing increasingly nervous about dinner with James. She changed outfits twice, settling finally on a simple black dress that felt like armor. The restaurant he'd chosen was new to her, an upscale farm-to-table place that had opened in what used to be an old mill building at the edge of town. James was already seated when she arrived, looking almost as uncomfortable as she felt. Rachel had stayed home with the twins, giving the siblings space for what promised to be a difficult conversation. "You look well," James said after they'd ordered drinks, his attempt at small talk falling flat in the tension between them. "Let's not do this, James," Emma replied quietly. "Neither of us is good at pretending. Just say what you asked me here to say." Her brother's composure slipped slightly, and she caught a glimpse of genuine emotion beneath his controlled exterior. "I've been trying to find the right words all day," he admitted. "Nothing seems adequate." "Try the truth," Emma suggested. "It's worked pretty well so far this week." James took a long drink of his water before meeting her eyes directly. "I failed you, Emma. When you needed me to believe you, to stand up for you, I chose to believe Dad instead. I told myself it was because his version made more sense, but the truth is, it was easier. Believing you meant having to confront who he really was, who our family really was." He paused, "And I wasn't brave enough to do that." The simple admission hit Emma with unexpected force. For years, she'd carried anger toward James for his betrayal, his refusal to accept the truth of what their father had done. Hearing him acknowledge it now released something tightly held inside her. "After you left," James continued, "I threw myself into being exactly what Dad wanted, the perfect son, the medical student, the future heir to his practice. It wasn't until I met Rachel that I started questioning any of it." She saw through the Carter family facade immediately. "She seems remarkable," Emma said sincerely. "She is." A genuine smile crossed James's face for the first time. "She was the one who encouraged me to reach out to you years ago. I drafted so many emails, made so many phone calls that I hung up before you answered. Pride, fear, shame, they all got in the way." Their food arrived, creating a brief pause in the conversation. Emma found she had little appetite despite the beautifully presented dish before her. "I read Dad's letter," she said finally. "He admitted everything. About my arm. About his anger. About trying to be a better father to Lily." James nodded slowly. "He changed after his heart attack. Not completely. He was still controlling, still difficult. But something broke open in him. He started talking about you more, about regrets. He kept track of your career obsessively." He hesitated. "The boys know all about their Aunt Emma, who builds amazing buildings. They have a poster of your Chicago tower in their room." The image of her nephews growing up with her work on their wall created a complicated ache in Emma's chest. So many lost years, so many missed connections. "I'm going to the cabin tomorrow," she told him. "Dad left journals there apparently. Things he wanted me to read. Do you want company?" James asked, echoing Sarah's earlier offer. Emma shook her head. "I need to do this part alone. But I'll be back Saturday. Maybe I could see the boys before I leave. Get to know my nephews a little." "They'd love that," James said, relief evident in his voice. "They have soccer in the morning, but they're free after lunch." As they finished their meal, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. James's medical practice, Emma's current projects, memories of childhood summers at the lake cabin before everything had fallen apart. Not quite comfortable, but no longer weighted with decades of unspoken pain. When they parted outside the restaurant, James hesitated, then gave Emma a quick, awkward hug. "Safe drive to the cabin tomorrow," he said. "And Em, thank you for giving me a chance to say these things. I've carried them for too long." Emma nodded, not trusting her voice for a moment. 15 years is a long time, she finally managed. But maybe not too long. As she drove back to the house on Maple Street, Emma realized that somewhere in these difficult days since her return, Oak Ridge had stopped feeling like enemy territory. The ghosts were still there, the painful memories still fresh, but alongside them now were new connections, tentative possibilities, a half-sister with shared passions, nephews she'd never met, siblings trying to bridge old wounds. Whatever waited for her at the cabin tomorrow, Emma knew that her relationship with her family had already shifted irrevocably. The question now was what shape it would take moving forward, and whether the foundations they were cautiously rebuilding could support the weight of their complicated history. The cabin looked smaller than Emma remembered. Nestled among pine trees on a wooded lot overlooking Lake Champlain, the cedar-sided structure had weathered to a soft silver gray over the decades. Emma sat in her rental car for several minutes, watching sunlight dance across the water beyond the cabin's wide front porch. The last time she'd been here, she was 17, the summer before everything fell apart. Finally, Emma grabbed her overnight bag and approached the familiar front door. The key from her father's estate still worked, the lock turning with a slight resistance before giving way. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and the faint mustiness of a place closed up for months. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams streaming through the windows. Much like her childhood bedroom, the cabin seemed preserved in time. The same faded plaid sofa, the stone fireplace with family photos arranged on the mantel, the pine dining table where they played board games on rainy days. Emma moved through the space slowly, memories surfacing with each familiar object. Her mother teaching her to play chess at that table. Her father showing James how to tie fishing flies at the small desk by the window. Sarah as a toddler, chasing fireflies on the porch at dusk. The desk. Her father's letter had mentioned journals in the desk drawer. Emma crossed to it, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. The roll-top desk had belonged to her grandfather, its surface scarred with decades of use. Emma pulled open the center drawer and found what she was looking for. A stack of leather-bound journals, 7 in all, arranged chronologically according to the dates written on their spines. She carried them to the sofa and sat down, the weight of her father's private thoughts heavy in her lap. The first journal began shortly after her mother's death, the handwriting inside more hurried and jagged than the precise script she associated with her father. Emma began to read, immersing herself in her father's inner world for the first time. The early entries were dark, filled with grief for her mother and self-recrimination for failures in their marriage. Elizabeth knew about Catherine, he'd written. She confronted me months before her diagnosis. The cancer might have been growing inside her even then, while I was causing her pain of another kind entirely. Emma read on, moving from one journal to the next as afternoon stretched into evening. She built a fire in the fireplace as darkness fell, the familiar smell of wood smoke adding to the sense of time collapsing around her. Through her father's words, a more complete picture emerged, of a man struggling with his own rigid expectations, his inability to express emotion except through anger, his growing awareness of how his behavior had damaged his children. The entry from the day she left was particularly difficult to read. "Emma is gone," he'd written. The look in her eyes when I grabbed her arm, the sound it made when it broke. "These things will haunt me forever." I told the doctor she fell down the stairs. He didn't believe me. I saw it in his face. James is pretending to believe me. Sarah is scared. I've become the monster I always feared was inside me. Emma closed the journal, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, letting the cool liquid soothe her tight throat. Outside, moonlight silvered the lake's surface, a gentle breeze creating ripples that caught the light like scattered diamonds. She returned to the journals, reading late into the night. The later entries documented her father's evolving relationship with Lily, his attempts to be more open and supportive with Sarah, his complicated pride in James's accomplishments mixed with regret over the pressure he'd placed on his son. And throughout all the journals, references to Emma, clippings of her projects, notes about awards she'd won, reflections on what he would say to her if she ever gave him the chance. The final journal ended just 3 months ago, the last entry written in a shakier hand that betrayed his declining health. Saw Emma's new museum design in the Architectural Journal today. The critics call it revolutionary and humanistic, words that describe its creator as much as her work. I've arranged everything with Reynolds. After I'm gone, perhaps she'll finally hear what I couldn't say in life. My greatest hope and greatest fear is that she'll come to this place and find these words. If you're reading this, Emma, know that I am prouder of you than you could ever imagine, not for your success, but for your courage to become yourself despite me, not because of me. Emma closed the final journal and placed it with the others on the coffee table. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over the lake, bands of pink and gold stretching across the water. She hadn't meant to read through the night, but the journals had pulled her through time, offering a perspective on her father and herself that she'd never had before. She made coffee and carried it out to the porch, settling into one of the Adirondack chairs to watch the sunrise. The air was crisp with early autumn, the maple trees along the shoreline beginning to flame with red and gold. A loon called from somewhere out on the water, its haunting cry echoing across the lake. Emma's phone had been off since she arrived, the cabin being one of the few places left without reliable cell service or Wi-Fi. Now she turned it on, watching as messages populated the screen, a check-in text from Sarah, a reminder from James about meeting his boys that afternoon, an update from her office in Seattle, and surprisingly, a message from Lily. Hope you found what you needed at the cabin. Thanks again for looking at my work yesterday. It meant more than I can say. The simple message brought a smile to Emma's face. She replied, feeling a certainty she hadn't expected. Found more than I expected. Would like to talk more about that internship when I'm back in town. Heading there soon. After breakfast, Emma packed her overnight bag and gathered the journals. She wasn't sure yet what she would do with them, whether she'd keep them, share certain parts with Sarah or James, or simply store them away. For now, they represented a bridge between who her father had been and who he'd struggled to become. As she locked the cabin door behind her, Emma took one last look at the lake. This place held complicated memories, both painful and precious. But it was also the site of a kind of reconciliation she'd never thought possible. Not a simple forgiveness that erased the past, but a more nuanced understanding that allowed space for truth and growth. The drive back to Oak Ridge took her through small towns and past fields being harvested for the season. Emma found herself noticing details she'd overlooked on the drive up, a covered bridge with fresh red paint, an old cemetery with stones tilting at odd angles, a farm stand selling late-season apples and pumpkins. The New England landscape of her childhood was both familiar and new, seen through eyes that had spent years looking at the mountains and water of the Pacific Northwest. She arrived at James's house just after lunch. The Tudor-style home in one of Oak Ridge's newer developments was exactly what she would have expected from her brother. Traditional, well-maintained, subtly signaling success without ostentation. The sound of children's laughter led her around to the backyard, where she found James pushing his sons on a tire swing hanging from a massive oak tree. "Aunt Emma," one of the twins called out, spotting her first. Both boys scrambled off the swing and raced toward her, their initial shyness from yesterday apparently forgotten. "Boys, don't tackle her," James warned, but his tone was light, amused. Emma knelt down to their level, still not entirely confident in how to interact with children. "Hey there, Michael and Thomas, right? Which one's which?" "I'm Michael," said the one with a small scar above his eyebrow. "He's Thomas. Did you really sleep in a cabin in the woods? Were there bears?" Emma laughed. "No bears that I saw, but there was a loon on the lake this morning." "What's a loon?" Thomas asked, his expression serious. "It's a black and white bird with a call that sounds like this," Emma demonstrated, surprising herself with how well she remembered the sound. Both boys giggled in delight. "Do it again," Michael demanded. For the next hour, Emma found herself drawn into the boys' world, showing them how to skip stones on the small pond at the edge of the property, examining a fairy house they'd built under a rhododendron bush, answering endless questions about Seattle and the buildings she designed. "Could you design us a tree house?" Thomas asked, pointing to the oak. "Dad says he'll build us one, but he doesn't know how to make it cool." "Hey, I heard that," James called from the patio where he was setting up a pitcher of lemonade and cookies. But he's not wrong. Emma studied the tree, her architect's mind automatically assessing possibilities. "I think this tree could support something pretty amazing. Maybe next time I visit, I could draw up some plans." Both boys' eyes widened. "You'll come back?" Michael asked. The question caught Emma off guard. Would she? After all these years of avoiding Oak Ridge, avoiding her family, would she willingly return? Looking at her nephew's hopeful faces, at James watching from the patio with an expression of cautious optimism, she found the answer wasn't as difficult as she'd expected. "Yes," she said simply. "I'll come back." Later, as James walked her to her car, the boys having been called inside by Rachel for their naps, he said quietly, "They already adore you." "They're great kids," Emma replied honestly. "You and Rachel have done well with them." James leaned against the car, his posture more relaxed than she'd seen since her arrival. "How was the cabin? Did you find what Dad wanted you to see?" "I found his journals," Emma said. 7 years worth. I read them all." James studied her face. "Good reading or bad?" "Both." "Neither." Emma shrugged, finding it hard to articulate. It was illuminating. He was more self-aware than I ever gave him credit for, especially toward the end. He wanted to call you so many times, James said. After his heart attack, he talked about it constantly. I should have pushed him harder to do it. Emma shook her head. It wouldn't have worked. I wasn't ready either. She opened the car door, but paused before getting in. I'm having dinner with Sarah tonight before I leave tomorrow. Would you and Rachel want to join us? Maybe Lily too. The invitation surprised James as much as it surprised Emma herself. But it felt right. One meal with all of them together before she returned to her life in Seattle. I'd like that, James said. I'll call Lily if you want. Please do. That evening, the five of them gathered around Sarah's dining room table, the same table where they'd read their father's will just days before. But the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Rachel had brought a bottle of good wine. Lily had contributed a dessert she'd baked herself, and Sarah had prepared their mother's recipe for beef bourguignon. The conversation flowed more easily than Emma would have imagined possible. They talked about the twins' latest adventures, Lily's upcoming final semester at Princeton, James's plans to modernize aspects of the medical practice. Sarah mentioned considering a career change, moving from administration to social work, something she'd always been interested in but had put aside to care for their father. You should do it, Emma encouraged her. You've always been the one holding everyone else together. You'd be amazing at supporting people through difficult times. That's what I told her, Lily agreed, and Emma was struck again by how naturally her half-sister seemed to fit with them, despite all the complex history. As they finished dessert, a remarkably good apple tart that Lily admitted was her grandmother's recipe, Emma realized she had news of her own to share. I've been thinking, she began, setting down her coffee cup. The cabin needs work if I'm going to keep it. New roof, updated plumbing, better insulation for winter use. She paused, seeing their surprised expressions. I thought I might come back during the holidays. Spend some time working on it. Maybe even spend Christmas there. If anyone wanted to join me. The invitation hung in the air for a moment before Sarah broke the silence. I'd love that. Christmas at the cabin would be wonderful. The boys would go crazy for a Christmas in the woods, Rachel added, glancing at James. He nodded slowly. I could take some time off. We could make it work. Lily looked uncertain. Would I be welcome to? I don't want to intrude on family traditions. You are family, Emma said firmly, surprising herself with how true the words felt. It wouldn't be complete without you. Later, as Emma packed her bags for her flight the next morning, she reflected on the remarkable shift that had occurred in just 1 week. She'd come to Oak Ridge to say goodbye to a father she'd spent 15 years trying to forget, expecting to endure a few difficult days before returning to her separate life. Instead, she was leaving with plans to return, with new relationships beginning to form, with old wounds not healed completely, but perhaps beginning to scar over in a way that allowed movement forward. The journals she'd found at the cabin were packed carefully in her suitcase. She wasn't ready to share them yet, might never share certain parts. But they had given her something she hadn't realized she needed, a more complete understanding of the complicated man who had been her father, and by extension, a more complete understanding of herself. As she closed her suitcase, Emma caught sight of her reflection in the mirror above the dresser. The face looking back at her seemed subtly different from the one that had arrived in Oak Ridge a week ago, still recognizably herself, but perhaps a bit more at peace. Sarah appeared in the doorway. All packed? Emma nodded. I think so. I'll drive you to the airport in the morning, Sarah offered. Unless you'd rather take a taxi? I'd like you to drive me, Emma said, smiling at her sister. We can make a final stop at that bakery on Main Street. I remembered today how much I've missed their cinnamon rolls. Sarah laughed. Some things never change. I'll add it to our morning plan. As Sarah turned to go, Emma called after her. Hey, Sarah. Thank you for asking me to come home. For not giving up on me all these years. Sarah's smile was gentle, understanding. You're my sister, Em. That never changed, even when everything else did. That night, Emma slept soundly in her childhood bedroom, no longer feeling like a stranger in a preserved museum of her past. Tomorrow she would return to Seattle, to her firm, to the life she'd built for herself far from Oak Ridge. But now that life would expand to include something she'd never expected to reclaim. A family, complicated and imperfect, but hers nonetheless. Outside her window, the maple tree that had witnessed so much of her childhood stood tall against the night sky. Its leaves were beginning to turn with the season, preparing for the inevitable changes that autumn would bring. Emma found herself looking forward to seeing it in all seasons again. The bare branches of winter, the tender green of spring, the full canopy of summer, and next year's autumn colors. A cycle of renewal that had continued long before her return and would continue long after.